Good morning from Boston. Good afternoon or evening, wherever you guys are tuning in from. Welcome to this presentation on traveling to the US as an F-1 or J-1 international student. We are going to go ahead and jump right in and introduce ourselves. So my name is Chelsea L'Italian. I'm the Associate Director of Incoming International Student Services in the Office of Global Services. And I'll let my colleague introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Kushal Safi, and I work over in the Global Safety Office. My office is charged with supporting students, faculty, and staff as they're conducting mobility programs around the world, and ultimately when you're coming into the U.S. We're really excited to have you at Northeastern, and I'm sure you're excited to arrive.
Um, we are very excited to be welcoming you to the US so very soon. We've got a lot of information to share with you about how to hopefully make that transition into the US successful. To get us started, I just wanted to share our contact information here. So the Office of Global Services, we have our sort of primary office on the Boston campus at 354 Richards Hall. You will probably get very familiar with that building once you arrive on campus. But of course, if you're going to any of our other US global campuses, there is an OGS staff member dedicated for each of those campuses as well. And then on here, you can see our phone number, our website. The best way to contact us is our service portal. And I'm going to share a little bit later a QR code to that service portal. I'll also go ahead and put the link in the chat as well. But yeah, that's the OGS contact info. And we've got the Global Safety Office contact info here as well. I don't know if there's more you want to say about that.
No, feel free to email us with any information or any support that you need. We coordinate really closely with OGS. So if there are questions that come into our office about OGS type questions, we're going to forward it to them. If it's more on the line of a question about what to do on arrival, we're happy to answer those.
Awesome. I'm just dropping the service portal link into the chat here. Cool. All right. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk very briefly about just the things to consider as an F1 or J1 international student. We're going to talk about preparing for your arrival, some actual tips and things to keep in mind as you are arriving and entering the US. A couple of things that you're going to need to do pretty soon after you arrive in the US, and then a couple other things to keep in mind about being an international student and the things that are available to you. And of course, the restrictions that come along with that as well. If you have questions, our colleague Megan noted in the chat, there is a Q&A function in this webinar. Please feel free to go ahead and share your questions there. We will reserve a little bit of time at the end to try and answer some, but we'll also try and spend some time over there as each other are speaking so that we can answer your questions as they come in. If you have like really specific questions about your unique situation, we're not going to be able to get into those here. That's something that you'll want to reach out to our office about through either of the contact methods that we mentioned before. But if you have general questions about the topics that we're discussing, we're happy to address those in the Q&A over here. We also won't be able to answer any of your possibly many questions about all of the other things that are likely on your mind right now as you're getting ready to travel to the US. So you can see on the slide here, there's sort of direction towards if you have questions about your health insurance or your student employment, student financial services, things like housing. Those are all going to be available on Northeastern's website. We also have a series of webinars throughout the rest of this week where you'll get to hear from our colleagues in some of these offices as well. So if you have questions about those things, we can't answer them today, but you hopefully will be able to get those questions answered. So to dive right in, this is an idea of where all of our many Northeastern campuses are located throughout the US. So whichever of these you are planning to come to, we're going to have dedicated staff available to you from OGS on site. You also have access to the Global Safety Office and to OGS's main office via the contact methods we mentioned before. But, as we are truly a global campus network, and just throughout the US, we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We've just added our new New York City campus, which is very exciting. We have campuses all over the East and West Coast. So whichever of these you are coming to, we are really excited to welcome you, and we want to make that process as smooth as possible. So to give a sort of rough overview of what your pre-arrival timeline ideally should look like, your first step was being admitted to Northeastern, so congrats on that. And then getting your I-20 if you're an F-1 student, or your DS 2019 if you're a J-1 student, and then going through the visa application process. Hopefully at this point, your visa has been issued and you're ready to travel. And then we are conducting this series of pre-arrival webinars. This is where we are today. Then you will successfully travel to the US. You will, once you've arrived, complete what's called immigration clearance. That is something for OGS. That is not related to clearing immigration at the airport. I'll go into more information on what this immigration clearance e-form is, but it's so that we can register your CVIS record and your student status can officially start. You'll also have to attend international student orientation. This is done asynchronously online, and then you will start your courses. So I did mention that hopefully at this point, everyone has gotten their visa, has successfully completed their visa appointment, your visa interview. I understand, though, that visa slots have been pretty tricky to get in some cases. And so some of you may not have had your appointment yet. So I encourage you, if you didn't watch our most recent webinar on the visa application, the visa interview process, check out our website. There's info here. And then there's also a recording to our most recent webinar on this process. So make sure that you are really making full use of the resources that we have available on our website. Those are there to help you succeed. So a big thing I will emphasize probably more than once during this session is that the primary purpose of your F1 or J1 status is to study and engage as a student. So this means that you must enroll in full-time on-ground classes throughout the full duration of your studies. You must attend your classes and make progress towards your degree completion, and you must obtain appropriate authorization for any experiential learning opportunities. I take any opportunity I can to emphasize these things because I think there are so many things that students get excited about when they're coming to the US and they want to learn about. But how do I get co-op? How do I start, experiential learning, these off-campus opportunities? And those are all things that will be available to you, but your primary purpose here is to study and engage as a student. And I really want you to keep that in mind as you are preparing to come to the US, as you're traveling to the US, as you're entering the US. This is your primary purpose here and the primary purpose of the visa that you've been issued. I'm going to pass you over to Kushal for some hot tips from the Global Safety Office.
Perfect, thanks. I can go to the next slide. All right, thank you, Chelsea. So a few weeks before you depart your home for your journey to Northeastern campus, any campus that we have here in the US, we ask that you take a moment to do a few things. So the first thing that we're asking you to do is register your travel in the travel registry. You can go onto the me.northeastern portal or your student hub and enter your information, flight information into the US, telephone number that you'll be using while you're traveling. All of that you can go into the portal, and it's under My Travel Plan. So if you go into that me.northeastern portal, you're going to see a section there that you can search, type in My Travel Plans, and then you'll be able to add some information right to that travel registry. We also ask that you update your contact information in the same portal. So you can go to the Student Hub, you can add some information about yourself, you can add some information about your emergency points of contact. We highly recommend that you put in emergency contact information for your family that might be back at home, and also perhaps somebody who might be here in the US that might be able to help you with anything that happens while you're entering or while you're in the States. It's okay if you don't have anybody. That's something that I'm going to give you a few numbers in a minute so that you'll have and I want you to program those numbers into your phone. We also want you to take a look and make sure that all the information in that is correct. And then we want to make sure that you have all of your paperwork in order. So what does that mean? That means that you have, your visa is proper. Your name on your visa is correct. You have your documentation to show the immigration attorney, such as your passport is right, it's signed. Your I-20 is there. The expiration dates on your documentation are correct. Your enrollment information, you also have that information with you, such as your course schedule, your letter of admission, things like that. Also, you want to provide evidence of payment to the university. If you haven't already paid your tuition, that's okay. Make sure that you show that you have the ability to provide enough funds or sufficient funds to live and stay in the US. An immigration officer can ask you for this. So make sure that you have a document showing that, and or you're able to log into your bank account to show that officer that you have those funds. We also recommend highly that all the documents that I talked about, that you have multiple copies of each of those documents in order to give to that inspector in the event they ask for it. Collate those, make sure they're in a proper order, and then you can hand that right over to the immigration officer in the event they ask. Please also register with your embassy or consulate. A great example is the Indian consulate has a portal, the Pramit portal, and you can go into that portal. You can tell the Indian consulate in New York, because that is the closest to our Boston campus. There are other consulates that are closer to a campus of, say, if you're in Oakland or you're in Miami, that you can register with. But for the sake of argument, the Indian consulate is the easiest. The Indian consulate in New York is the easiest if you're studying in the Boston campus. You can go right onto their website. You can provide some information into that portal, and you can give them some information about yourself, your contact information. And the nice thing about consulates, not only the Indian consulate, but all the consulates here in the U.S., they invite students to in-person events and virtual webinars to help them, be more familiar with the U.S. and to build that sense of community amongst other people from the country that you're traveling from. Next slide. So upon arrival at the port of entry, we've already talked about making sure that you have all your documents in order. Like, in the very unlikely situation that you have a concern, we're going to ask you to do two things. One, when you land, notify a friend or family member that you've arrived, and then make sure that friend or family member has the contact information for our GSOC. So the GSOC number is right here. It's that +1 617 373 5000. Tell your friend or family that, if they haven't heard from you in the next hour or 2 hours, that usually is how long it takes to clear inspection. Have that friend call in and provide information about you, and that, which airport you're at, and that so we can then, provide some level of assistance. Again, we think it's very, very rare that this happens, but we do see that if you have a plan in place, it'll help. If you have your documents in place, it'll help. If you have all your information that's on your phone, it'll be very helpful. Also, in the very rare chance that you're stopped, be courteous. We suggest that you designate the university as your point of contact, so that phone number, and so provide that phone number to the official, and then that official can then call in, and he might be able to make sure that there's a way for us to clear whatever issue you might be experiencing. You can also ask that official to notify the university of your delayed arrival. You might also be able to call the university, so memorize that number. The immigration inspector might be able to call over and explain to us why you're being delayed. And ultimately, that will give us an opportunity to put in place some level of support for you, and then notify our people here so that they can communicate or coordinate your entry with the CBP official. Next slide. So here are some questions that you might be asked at the port of entry. These are all legitimate questions that an immigration officer can ask you. I'll give you a few seconds to look over these questions. But as Chelsea said earlier, whenever you're asked about your purpose of being in the US, your primary reason or the primary purpose for your travel to the US, if you're here on an F-1 visa, is to study. Therefore, if you cite any other reason for entering the US on an F-1 visa, you might be subject to additional screening and additional scrutiny. All right, next slide. There have also been a lot of discussions about social media searches. Those searches have already been done by the embassy or consulate where you put your where you submitted your visa application. That said, immigration officials are authorized to recheck your electronic devices. So please review the policy, the CBP policy on device searches. That's in this link here. And we also recommend that you take a look at there's a DNI document about the Director of National Intelligence, U.S. Traveling with portable devices. That's some information that's located here on this American Immigration Lawyer Association. I would take a look there. The university has, an additional website. If you go onto the Global Safety website regarding travel with portable devices, you can look at that too. That gives you a lot of really good information about, what you should know when you're entering into the U.S. And I believe that's the end of my slide deck. So if you have any questions or you need additional clarification on some of these, I'm going to be in the chat and I can make sure that I answer your questions there. If not, or if you have more of a specific question, again, you can email mytravelplans@northeastern.edu and you can send that information over to us. We'll have somebody communicate with you as soon as they get a chance. So again, I appreciate your attention and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person, either in the Boston campus or one of our other campuses within the US. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you so much. That is incredibly helpful information for everyone to keep in mind as you are traveling. Hopefully it helps sort of ease any concerns that you might have and just help you feel more excited and confident about arriving in the US for this next exciting chapter in your life. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some things related specifically to OGS and to some of the things you'll need to do when you first arrive and some of the documents that you will either carry with you or get shortly after you arrive. I do want to make a quick note about late arrival, since, like I mentioned, we all understand that it's been tricky for some folks to get a visa appointment in the first place. So if you are still going through that process and starting to get nervous about the upcoming start of the semester, we do allow for students to request permission for late arrival. So ideally, all students should be in the US by the start date on your I-20 or your DS 2019 if you're in J-1 status. Again, we understand that some circumstances might not allow this to happen. And so we have a section on our website. I will go ahead and put the link in the chat as well, called Arriving in the US. And this is where you can find information about late arrival. Late arrival is approved on a case-by-case basis, and so you will have to submit a request. There are certain parameters that you have to meet. For example, your visa interview appointment does still need to be before the start date of the semester. So September 9th is the start of the semester. You still have to have your visa appointment by September 8th in order to then be eligible for late arrival. There's a few other questions that you'll have to answer that will go to your academic department, because they are the ones that will actually approve if you're able to arrive late, because they know the academic calendar and if you would be missing too much by arriving too late. If you're approved for late arrival, then the latest that you're able to arrive in the US is going to be September 22nd. Hopefully this isn't something that too many of you have to do, and hopefully everybody is able to arrive by the semester start date. So hopefully also at this point, you've got your I-20 if you're an F-1 student, or your DS 2019 if you're a J-1 student. Make sure to review these documents in detail. Make sure that your name exactly matches what's on your passport. Make sure that the program of study is correct. This is the program that you are planning to attend. Note that the major, the name of the program of study, uses a government classification code. So it might not exactly match the name of your major according to your Northeastern catalog. But make sure that it is the correct code for your major. Make sure that your financial information correctly reflects what you shared with us. Make sure that that financial information is the same as what you're going to be sharing in your visa interview if you haven't already been there. If you are asked at the port of entry into the US about financial info, make sure that that is what you demonstrated on your I-20. Make sure that things are staying consistent throughout this process. Also, make sure that you print out your I-20 using a high quality color printer because our signature is in blue and it should stay in blue. Make sure you read the third page of your I-20. That is a pretty thorough overview of the requirements of F-1 status. And so make sure you read that third page and then sign the first page of your I-20 to indicate that you have read those regulations and that you agree to abide by them. Separate from the I-20 is your visa. Hopefully, we are all at the point where we've got this visa. I understand, though, that that may not be the case for everybody. Inspect your visa. Make sure that all the information on there is correct. It will have your CVIS ID. Make sure that that matches your I-20. Make sure that your name is correct. Take note of the number of entries that are available to you. In most cases, it's going to say M for multiple. If it just says S for single or it has a specific number, make sure you're aware of that because that's how many times you're allowed to use that visa. Most times it's going to say M for multiple, which means you can use that visa as many times as you want within the period of validity. So make sure you also take note of the dates, the expiration date especially. You can use that visa up until that expiration date to enter the US or to request entry to the US. And then it is up to the official at the border to make a determination on that. But right up until the date that that visa expires, you can be using that to request entry to the US. Once you are inside the US, your visa can expire. That is okay. The visa is an entry document. So as long as you're continuing to maintain your status with a valid I-20 or DS 2019, if you're in J-1 status, a valid I-94, which is a document I'm going to talk about shortly, those are the things that will demonstrate your status inside the US. Visa is just an entry document. So we don't recommend traveling just to renew a visa. If you're in the US and your visa expires, no problem. The next time you travel outside the US, then you'll need to renew it before you re-enter. So yeah, make sure you review everything on your visa, make sure all the information is correct and that you are familiar with what is on it. The other document that I mentioned is an I-94. And so, oh, sorry, I do see a question that I am going to go back and answer real quick. Someone said the signature on their I-20 is not blue, it is black. That is okay. It is typical that they are in blue. If it is in black, that is actually not a problem. Thank you for pointing that out. It used to be when I-20s were issued physically and sent via the mail, they had to be physically signed in blue ink. Now that they are issued electronically as a PDF, the blue ink is not a requirement. So thank you for asking that. But in most cases, it'll be blue. And so that's why we say to print it in color. If it's not, then you can print it in black and white. Okay, yeah, let's talk about the I-94. This is another document that I mentioned demonstrates your status. You will not have an I-94 yet. The I-94 is something that you will get after you enter the US. This is your arrival and departure record of any time you're entering or leaving the US. There's a website on here that you can see, cbp.gov/I-94. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat as well. That is where you will get your I-94. This is a government document. Sorry, I'm having trouble talking and typing at the same time. This is a document that you should retrieve every time you enter the US. This is going to reflect every time you enter the US, it will reflect the date that you entered, the status that you entered in, and your admit until date. So you want to take a really close look at all of those things every time you enter the US. You want to visit the website I just put in the chat. We will also include a link to this website when we send you reminders about our immigration clearance e-form, because that is something that you will do next after this. But the link is also in the chat and on the screen here. So you want to go to the CBP website and pull your I-94 every time you enter the US. This screenshot here is what it's going to look like. And so again, make sure that you check that the date is your most recent entry. I see a question, we don't get the I-94 until we enter the first time. Correct. You most likely don't have an I-94 yet if you have not entered the US before. So when you enter the US in F-1 status, an I-94 record will be created for you in the US government system. And once you're in the US, you don't have to do this at the airport. You can do it once you get to your accommodation, once you've entered the US. You should go to this website, pull your I-94, and check and make sure that the date does reflect your most recent date of entry. And you want to do this every time you enter. So if you're a couple years into your program and you travel and you come back, pull your I-94 and make sure that your most recent date of entry is on there. Make sure it says the correct status. For most of you, that'll be F1. For some of you, it might be J-1, but make sure that's correct. And then check your admit until date. I have info on the next slide about the admit until date. So on your I-94, if you enter the US on or before September 14th of this year, your admit until date on your I-94 will say D/S. That means duration of status. If you enter the US on or after September 15th of this year, your admit until date will be a specific date that reflects how long you're able to stay in the US. Typically, your admit until date is going to be the end date on your I-20 or your DS 2019 plus a 30-day grace period. If your I-20 is longer than 4 years, then your admit until date will just be for 4 years. There will be opportunities to extend that date later. After each reentry, like I said, you should pull your I-94 and double check all this info again. You are going to get a lot more information about what the admit until date means and just everything that comes along with it. This is part of a new rule from the Department of Homeland Security that is changing how the admit until date works. So you're going to get a lot of information from us about that. So I'm not going to go into more detail on that today because my focus is really just on your admission documents and the actual point of entry into the US. But rest assured, you will get a lot of information from our office about what the admit until date means, how to make sure that it aligns with your program, and if it doesn't, what your process will be to extend it if needed. So rest assured that information is coming. I don't have it for you today, but you absolutely will get it from us in your orientation and through direct contact with us. But yeah, make sure you check on your I-94 what your admit until date is, along with the status is correct and the date that you entered is correct. So once you've entered the US, you've gotten your I-94, you've confirmed that everything on your I-94 is correct, then you're going to do online immigration clearance. And that is just an OGS e-form. This is not, again, I think I mentioned, this is not like clearing immigration at the airport. This is not something you're doing at the airport. This is not something you're doing before arrival. You have to do this after you've arrived in the US, after you've gotten your I-94. Then you're going to complete OGS online immigration clearance. This is essentially international student check-in at Northeastern. This is how we do this check-in process. It is an e-form, and you are possibly already familiar with all the e-forms that our office uses. You filled out an e-form to request your I-20, things like that. So this will be an e-form that you submit to our office, to OGS. You'll have to upload a couple of documents, your copy of your visa and your I-94 that you've just pulled from the website and confirmed that everything is correct. This will allow OGS to register your SEVIS record. Your SEVIS record will then change from initial to active, and your F1 or J-1 status will officially begin. This needs to be completed as soon as possible after you arrive in the US. it doesn't have to be like while you're still at the airport immediately, but again, once you've arrived at your accommodation, you've settled in, try to prioritize getting immigration clearance done as soon as possible. It must be completed within 30 days of your arrival to the US, or if you're a transfer student from another school, that's got to be within 15 days. So I recommend just doing it as early as possible, because as you can imagine, we've got thousands of these that will be coming into our office at once, that we are all then trying to report this information to CVIS, because ultimately what this does, it fulfills the requirement that students must report to their university within 30 days of arriving in the US, or within 15 days for CVIS transfers. And then we have to tell the government that you successfully did this, that you are here, you have legitimately arrived at Northeastern, and you are now ready to start your student status. So again, we will send a link to complete this e-form. It is not something you need to do before you travel, but keep in mind that once you've arrived, you'll want to do this as soon as possible so that we can report your arrival to the government. Some general information for you about OGS. We are here to support with a variety of different things. One of our main priorities, of course, is helping make sure that you are maintaining your status. And that means that you have the information you need to make sure that you're enrolled in the right number of classes, that you're not taking too many online classes, making sure you get the appropriate authorization for any employment, any co-ops, any experiential learning, any practical training. We're also here for sort of general support for cultural adjustment and for events. We have a wonderful programming team that puts on lots of really cool events throughout the year that help you to meet other international students, in some cases domestic students as well, to help you really feel connected on campus, because this is a huge change and a big new step for a lot of you. And so we want to make sure that you're supported throughout the process. We know that a lot of folks are curious about employment opportunities as a student. Number one, keep in mind what I have said before. The primary purpose of your status is to study. Any sort of employment or practical training or experiential learning, it is a benefit of your status. It is not guaranteed, and it's not the primary purpose of your status. But that being said, there are opportunities for different types of student employment, on-campus employment, curricular practical training, optional practical training. You will get a lot more information about these things during orientation. But this QR code, I'm pointing to the side because that's where my screen is, but this QR code on your screen, this will take you to our page on our website about employment if it's something you're curious about now. But again, know that this is sort of secondary to your primary purpose of studying, and you will get more info about this as you arrive in the US. I mentioned that our programming team has a lot of great events that you're able to participate in, that we encourage you to participate in. This is where you can find information about that. You can also find information about our Global Student Mentor Program. So if you are a graduate student coming to Boston or Silicon Valley, this program is available to you there. If you are not in those categories, there are a lot of other fantastic programs available to you. But specifically for students who fall into those categories, the Global Student Mentor Program is a really wonderful program that pairs up existing graduate students at Northeastern, international students, with new graduate international students at Northeastern to help you sort of get familiar with campus resources, to build a sense of community, and ultimately just help you feel that sense of belonging on campus. So I encourage you to check that out. And then I mentioned at the beginning, we've got a fantastic series of I think they're fantastic, a fantastic series of pre-arrival webinars throughout this week. So tomorrow morning at the same, well, morning for us, afternoon or evening for you, at the same time is going to be student support services. Wednesday will be academic culture in North America. Thursday will be living off campus as an international student, and Friday will be navigating health and wellness at Northeastern. So if you have not already registered for these, I encourage you to do so. It never hurts to be over-prepared and have all the information you can possibly get before you get here and start your program and are overwhelmed with all of the things that come along with being a new student. Megan has just shared the link to register for those in the chat, and there's also the QR code here. I am going to take a moment and just look through some of the questions that folks have submitted. And I will either try and answer them out loud or I will try and answer them in the chat box here. Um, I do see that there are a lot of questions, which is fantastic. I'm so happy that folks are so engaged and asking so many questions. If I don't get to your question, or if your question is really specific to your unique case, I encourage you to contact our office. I thought I had the QR code on here, but I don't. So I'm going to go back to the contact page at the beginning here. Yeah, if you have a specific question that I don't get to in the chat or out loud, please reach out to our office. That is what we're here for. Same thing with the Global Safety Office. If you have questions for us, we want to answer them. We want you to have the information that you need in order to succeed. So yeah, this though is the end of the actual presentation and the information that we are presenting to you. So if you don't have any questions, then you are dismissed. You are free to go and enjoy the rest of your day. We are, again, so very excited to welcome you to campus. I really, really hope that this information helps everything go smoothly. I hope that you are excited and not stressed and just looking forward to this exciting next chapter.